Hello friends. Probably, one way or another, we all love to dress up. Good quality and tasteful, and most importantly practical and convenient. We can easily list several brands of quality and original, of which there are no doubts from year to year and so for many decades. Of course, there are a dozen well-known clothing brands. But there is one among them, which was able to win the sympathy of millions of people around the world: discreet and refined, elegant. All these epithets are suitable for this particular brand, and the legendary crocodile flaunting on objects, clothes, accessories and sports equipment rightfully deserves respect. It was he who made the Lacoste brand one of the most popular and recognizable on all continents. Today, Lacoste is not only clothes and shoes, this is a huge number of watch accessories. And, of course, perfumes. By the way, according to official statistics, perfumes of this brand, one of the most sought after, especially about the male half of the population in 2018. The brand has made its mark. 85th birthday. By this time the company was able to achieve a very high level of sales and worldwide recognition. All this thanks to convenience, closely intertwined with high aesthetics. And of course, the invariable image of a crocodile, which in any color will be associated with a legend and a quality mark. Well, where did all this come from? Who came up with the idea to create a crocodile fighter, and why exactly a crocodile? And today I'll tell you about this acquaintance with the brand. It's better to start with its founder René Lacoste, who was born back in 1904 in a not at all poor family. His father was a very respected man in France. René's future was predetermined from his very childhood. My father was very strict and conservative. Most importantly, I am sure that the boy will occupy a high place in society, but the little ones did not think so at all. And even in childhood, the boy was passionate about tennis, and every free minute he tried to devote to him until the age of 15 to play this sport on his own, and sometimes, under the supervision of teachers, every day he became addicted to tennis. The whole point was that no one believed in the young man. His physical data was not enough for a successful career as an athlete. He was small and not very well, harmoniously very frail, as for a professional tennis player. But this was far from the only problem with the guy. The whole point is that the father was opposed to such involvement of his son. It even came to daily scandals with his father on the basis of sports. The aristocrats wanted their son to become an official. They were some kind of boy with a racket in his hands, but after a while he nevertheless agreed to give him a chance, but with only one condition: René had to become a world champion, and he had only 5 years for this. Just think, for 5 whole years, but for a real athlete. This is a critically short week, months of hard training, sleepless nights, and René's diligence to rely on intensive training and only on his own strength. He never completed any professional support courses from his father, was not to be expected. The young man could only on himself. He improved his technique, day after day. Watching the game of professionals, he learned a clear one. Quickly think over his every step, which directly led him to success in many respects. This past school of life will help him in the future with his creation. Already in 1923, he received an invitation to the largest international tennis tournament in France, and in 1924 he became one of the most successful tennis players in the country. Perhaps someone snickered the question, and why do we need to know all this? But it was during this period that the beginning of the great Lacoste empire was laid. Have you ever wondered how that same alligator appeared during one of his professional trips, walking the streets? Boston tennis players profit from expensive and extravagant accessories in the shop window: suitcase made of crocodile skin, very elegant, rather expensive. "If I win, I will defy nightly by you," the guy said to himself before one of the tough tournaments. He was a bright opponent, sometimes even aggressive. Every game was like a show. The guy put all his strength and efforts to win, and he did it the very next day. The crocodile suitcase no longer showed off in the window, and the press began to call René alligators for his style of play. He seemed to gallop around the court jerks like a crocodile. A couple of days after the victory, one of René Roberts' closest friends, George, part-time artist of Delta, My drawing of an alligator with an open mouth, graceful shapes and pressed small details bewitched René. The very next day he gives his white blazer to the atelier, where they transfer the drawing to one of the pockets. Since then a green crocodile has become a unique feature of Lacoste. In 1927 one of the US tournaments René comes out in a white polo stitched according to his individual sketch with 3 buttons on the chest which depicts the same special alligator. It is worth noting that at that time while tennis was played only in the preparation, the mandatory components of the form were a white shirt and trousers. Such a move by tennis players was assessed as a protest against the main rules of tennis tournaments, but whatever one may say, the white polo was much more convenient. It looked like a win-win against a green background court. It was a challenge for tennis as a sport in general. Many criticized the man and even wanted to ban him from playing. But he was so cool with his equipment that soon other tennis players began to copy René's uniforms, which, of course, the guy did not really like. After a series of such situations and the huge popularity of such floors among tennis players, René Lacoste ends his sports career and in 1933, together with the knitwear magnate Andrea Schiller, whom, by the way, very accidentally founds a new clothing brand, named after the surname from the polo shirt, and the world history and success of the Lacoste brand began. But that was not all. For the first time in fashion history, the logo has been posted. Nina, on the wrong side of branded products on the front, for which many even laughed at him, but as it turns out later, it was very in vain until the 50s that under the tail were only in universal white. But a little later he decided to experiment and the first colored shirts appeared on the American market. Polo. It was a breakthrough man in lacrosse polo. As if he had flown around. The special status of René did not set himself the task of massively flooding the shelves. Goods for him it was more like a work of art. Each individual item of clothing was supposed to be, first of all, a sign of quality and uniqueness. René did not spend money on advertising to give his word. Absolutely considered that a good and high-quality product is not needed. All this was done by Lacoste. Exclusive, of course, as he himself later recalled, I could embroider thousands of units of goods a day, simply by cluttering the shelves of stores. But then it would no longer be the Lacoste that I dreamed of. It was in the 50s that the first French sex was seen on John F. Kennedy and a client. Story. It was a sly move on René's part. He changed his mind. Competent and strategically correct course of shirts were sent as a gift to the most popular personalities of that time. It was a success. Literally in a matter of weeks Brent skyrocketed. Instead of spending millions on and public advertising, he managed only a couple of floors. Americans saved on everything and spent their last money to buy this high-status thing. Such popularity could not be explained by GSM. Lacoste. In one of his interviews he said, there are things that defy explanation. Maybe I should choose some other animal for the logo. Deer, harmless, nothing would have happened. Here, for example, is a rooster. Everyone would know that the French brand would probably not have had such an effect. However, the secret of the brand lies not at all in the Lacoste logo. It is famous for its versatility and aesthetics. The crocodile stripe was so high status that it could be worn in any situation, just for a walk or even an important event. Other equally well-known brands also began to modify their logo. Take at least a pony Ralph Lauren or an eagle American Eagle. Some went even further and did not even hesitate to completely copy the crocodile. Litigation with the Chinese crocodile company Garmin lasted a full 10 years until hundreds ordered plagiarists to change their logo. By the mid-50s, the assortment, the line was not too wide, and in 1958 a children's clothing line was released, and already in the 60s, saw leather accessories. By the time René was already ages past, it became difficult to cope with affairs. He deserved to rest, which he dreamed of for so long. Since 1963, his son Bernard Lacoste has been at the helm of the company, and since childhood he has always helped and supported his father in the family business and later made a significant contribution to the development of the company under his leadership. And in 70s, the company released perfumery, which idea occupies one of the first places in quality in the 80s, measure, saw sunglasses and tennis, shoes, leather accessories and peak hours of its popularity. The brand reached just the 80s. When rugby style came into fashion, future students of prestigious as colleges others emphasized their status by dressing excellently, and they wore checkered trousers, a woolen waistcoat, and loafers with lozenges. Of course, the legendary polo Lacoste. Bernard's main goal was to increase the assortment due to the increase in sales in the 90s. Lacoste polo shirts turned into the mainstream and began to be sold even in the Walmart chain of cheap department stores. But as it turns out later, the race for quantity played a cruel joke on the product. It began to be positioned as something easily accessible, ordinary, but by that time, competition was only growing. And dozens of young and successful brands appeared like mushrooms after rain, which gradually forced the alligator out of the market. By the end of the 90s, the company was going through a serious crisis. Sales were rapidly falling. The company seemed to be slowly sinking. Bernard even considered options for selling the family business, but did not do this. A joint decision of the board of directors, it was decided to launch a new line of clothing, and became the creative director of the brand. Modern Romeo of anti-crisis measures. It was he who was able to take the brand to a new level and launched a new line, primarily aimed at young people, which eventually became a win-win thanks to the mayor of Lacoste clothing again acquired its luxury. With the advent of a new line, the company decides to regain its former prestige. In parallel with clothing, new fragrances for men and women are released and several stores open on the most luxurious streets of New York. Lacoste presents its products. First branded boutique, Lacoste was opened in Moscow. From the very first days, which had overwhelming popularity, it was appropriate for the golden youth. Comfortable clothing has become incredibly fashionable and has moved the tennis courts to the streets of metropolitan areas. Things with a branded crocodile have ceased to be associated with sportswear. They were bought more often than clothes of other brands. Unfortunately, in the same year, the founder of the brand, René Lacoste, also passed away. His history and era did not end there in 2005 due to a serious illness of Bernard. The company passes into the hands of his younger brother Michel. A little later, after a while, the reins of government are transferred to Philippe Lacoste Vinokovo René. Each of them contributes something of his own to the company. At the same time, without changing the basic concept of the brand, versatility and aesthetics, today this brand remains one of the few enterprises under the leadership of which the Lacoste families are engaged exclusively. At present, the Lacoste brand is one of the most famous and best-selling in the world, and the company's products are represented in more than 100 countries on all continents. The average annual sales are more than 50 million units of own goods. The retail network has exceeded 3,000 stores. The company's headquarters are invariably located in Paris, and the entire production capital in the French city of Trinity, except for its own factories in France under licensed products. Companies also produce in Peru, Morocco and Italy. Recently Lacoste opened a branch in El Salvador in the free trade zone. This manufacturing enterprise is purely manufacturing. For the history of brands is like a fairy tale with a really bright unhappy ending. René Lacoste was still able to prove his love for the sport. In return, he got not only the fame of a professional tennis player, he got anyone with 1 million fans around the world. He laid the foundation for a prestigious future not only for himself, but also for children, grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. When I get into Lacoste stores, buyers feel that they have entered a small style house, receiving aesthetic pleasure and taking it into everyday life. Friends profiles. Personally, you treat crocodiles to him brand. Have you ever bought something in stores? Share your impressions and reviews in the comments. It will be very interesting to read them, and for today it's all over.